My grandmother found me and my daughter in a rundown motel. She asked gently, "Why aren't you staying in the apartment I registered in your name after your divorce?" I blinked. What apartment? 3 days later I showed up at a family brunch. My mother stopped mid-sentence. My father stared at the floor. After the divorce I thought I understood what being alone felt like. Turns out I didn't. Not even close. You learn things when you're staying in rundown motels with a toddler. You learn how to stretch oatmeal packets into dinner. You learn which gas stations let you fill a thermos with hot water for free. You learn to lie through your teeth when Mia asks why we can't go home. But mostly you learn who picks up the phone. Mine didn't. My parents said they were sorry to hear about the split, but things were complicated right now. My brother never called back. I figured my grandmother didn't even know. She was old school, handwritten notes, landline, still signed cards with warmly Edith. I hadn't seen her since Mia's first birthday. So when she knocked on our motel door I thought maybe I was hallucinating. I cracked the door open. She stood there like she didn't belong on this side of town, holding a bakery bag and looking past me into the dim, cracked room. Then she said it. "Why aren't you staying in the apartment I registered in your name after your divorce?" I blinked. What apartment? She didn't answer. Just gave me the bag and said she'd come back soon. She left. And I stood there holding a paper bag full of warm croissants with my daughter in a stained t-shirt behind me, and the words still bouncing in my head like an echo chamber. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking back to when I'd filed the papers. How I was too embarrassed to ask for help. How my parents told me I shouldn't rely on family money. How I was too proud to push harder when they suggested my grandmother wasn't in the right state of mind to get involved. But now it seemed like something had been taken from me. Deliberately. 3 days later I went to the family brunch. I didn't call ahead. I didn't ask if I could come. I just walked through the front door with Mia on my hip and let the silence roll through the room. My mother stopped mid-sentence. My father stared at the floor. My brother looked up then away. Nobody said hello. Except for her. My grandmother stood up slowly, like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. "Good," she said. "You made it." Then she turned to my parents and asked them in front of everyone where they put my apartment keys. No one answered her right away. My mother opened her mouth but nothing came out. My father rubbed his forehead and looked toward the window like maybe he hadn't heard the question. My brother reached for his glass of water and just held it there, not drinking, not moving. His wife looked at the floor. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My grandmother stepped closer to the table. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Just one question, quiet and sharp. "Where are the keys to the apartment I gave Rebecca?" Still nothing. So she said it again. This time not like a question but a fact. "I gave Rebecca that apartment. I registered it in her name after the divorce. I did it to make sure she and Mia had somewhere safe to live. Now someone explain to me why she's been living in motels for the past 6 months." My brother was the first to speak. He said something about confusion, how things got messy with the paperwork. That it had been a temporary arrangement. My grandmother turned to him. "You mean when you and your wife moved into the unit 6 days after Rebecca filed for divorce?" He didn't answer. Just looked down. My mother tried to jump in, talking fast, saying they hadn't wanted to overwhelm me with logistics while I was in such a vulnerable state. "You didn't tell her," my grandmother said. It wasn't a question. And then she did something I wasn't expecting. She pulled a small envelope from her bag and handed it to me. I opened it. Inside was a fresh set of keys and a copy of the original title transfer. It had my name on it. Filed, signed, dated. Months ago. Weeks after the divorce was finalized. The apartment had been mine all along. I looked at my father. He couldn't even meet my eyes. Then my grandmother made an announcement right there at the table. She said she was revising her will. She said any financial support she'd been giving to anyone was frozen until further notice. She said actions have consequences even for family. Then she kissed Mia on the head, told me she'd meet me at the apartment later that day and walked out of the room. No one followed her. I didn't either. I sat there a moment longer just holding the keys and let them all look at me like I was someone they didn't recognize anymore. Because maybe I wasn't. I didn't go straight there. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to feel it first. That it was real. That I wasn't dreaming some cruel joke where the doorman would call security the second I tried to open the door. So Mia and I got lunch. Real food. A place with menus and waitstaff and windows that didn't shake in the wind. I let her order whatever she wanted. She picked pancakes and fries. I didn't stop her. After that, I stood on the sidewalk outside the building for a long time. It was nicer than I remembered. I'd passed it a few times before walking Mia to the park, never once thinking it had anything to do with me. The kind of place with clean awnings and a little buzz when you press the intercom. I went up. The key fit. When the door opened, Mia ran in like she already knew it was ours. The place was quiet, half-furnished but spotless. There was a small balcony and a working heater. The air smelled like wood floors and sunlight. I stood in the doorway for a long time, not moving, just listening. I found a note on the kitchen counter. I had the place cleaned and cleared out. Hope you don't mind. E. I didn't have to ask who he was. There was a manila envelope under the note. Inside was a check. More than enough to cover everything I owed, plus several months ahead. And beneath that, a list of lawyers, family, custody, housing. She'd underlined 2 names. I didn't cry. I just sat down on the kitchen floor with Mia in my lap and breathed. That evening my phone rang. It was my brother. I let it ring out. He texted. Said they'd made a mistake. Said they didn't mean to steal the apartment. I didn't answer. Then my mother called. Said she was shocked I would show up and cause a scene. That I'd embarrassed the family. That if I had just come to them privately, things could have been handled more gracefully. I texted back. You had 6 months. Then I blocked her. Later that night I heard from my grandmother again. A short call. She asked how the place looked. I told her it was perfect. She said Mia deserved better than motel floors and vending machine dinners. I agreed. Before she hung up she said one more thing. This isn't charity, Rebecca. This is justice. I stared out the window after she hung up. For the first time in over a year I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't expect it to happen so fast. The first call came 3 days after I moved into the apartment. It was from my grandmother's attorney. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be someone from one of the motels trying to squeeze one last payment out of me. But I picked up. He introduced himself, then said my grandmother had made a series of legal amendments, some of them involving me. He said I didn't need to do anything yet, just that I'd be hearing from them again soon. He sounded cheerful. Like someone who had seen this kind of thing before and knew exactly how it would play out. By the end of the week it started. My brother and his wife were served eviction papers at the apartment they'd been living in. The one I now knew my grandmother had never actually signed over to them. She'd let them stay there temporarily. With conditions. One of them was that they help me if I ever needed support. They hadn't. I found out later they tried to argue their way out of it. Said they thought the apartment had been a gift. Said they didn't know anything about her intentions. The lawyer had receipts. Email chains. Text messages. One of them even said, "Don't tell Rebecca anything, she'll come running if she finds out." My grandmother sent me a screenshot of that one. She didn't say anything else with it. He didn't have to. Then came the freeze. The monthly allowance my parents had been living off for years. Gone. The consulting work my father did through the family trust. Cancelled. The extra car they'd leased? Returned. Credit cards. Suspended. My mom must have called everyone she knew to try and fix it, but none of them were willing to go up against my grandmother. She wasn't just rich. She was respected. Quiet but powerful. When she cut you off, people noticed. Then one afternoon she came by my apartment. She brought Mia a new coat and a puzzle. Sat with me at the kitchen table with a folder full of documents. Custody updates, daycare resources, long-term legal options. She didn't talk about the family. Not once. We just went through the paperwork together while Mia played in the other room. Right before she left, she asked me if the heat was working and if I'd had a chance to try the bakery down the block. I told her I had. That it was good. She smiled, kissed Mia goodbye, and walked out like she hadn't just burned an entire family tree to the ground. That night, I got a call from my mother. The voice on the other end didn't sound like her. She said she was disappointed in how I'd handled everything. That I'd made a spectacle. That I'd turned my grandmother against the family and destroyed something sacred. I asked her why she hadn't told me about the apartment. She said I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. I hung up. She called back. I didn't answer. A day later my brother texted. Said they'd been forced to move in with our parents. That I had no idea what kind of damage I'd caused. He was right. I had no idea just how fragile the whole thing had been. I thought I was the broken one, staying in motels, scraping by, feeling like I was the one who'd failed. Turns out I was the only one not propped up by a lie. And I had something they'd never get back: the trust of the one person they underestimated. A week after the eviction notice, I went by the old apartment. The one my brother and his wife had been squatting in. The one that was supposed to be mine all along. The locks had already been changed. My grandmother had the place emptied and cleaned out. She didn't need to say it, but I knew she wanted me to see what they'd left behind. She met me out front, handed me the spare key and told me I should see it for myself. I didn't bring Mia. I wasn't sure what I'd find. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect from people who never thought they'd have to leave. Designer junk left in a rush. Drawers still half full. Clothes on hangers. Empty champagne bottles in the kitchen. Fridge full of takeout. A broken photo frame under the coffee table with all of them smiling in front of the apartment window like they'd earned it. There was a stack of unopened mail on the counter. Letters addressed to me. Medical bills. Final notices. A birthday card from my grandmother I never saw. They'd been taking my mail. Tossing it. Hiding it. I sat on the couch, still warm from the sun through the windows, and looked around. I had imagined this place for so long. Wondered if I was crazy to think it had ever existed. I wasn't crazy. I was erased. They took what was mine and lived in it like I didn't exist. All while I was rationing milk for my daughter and sleeping with my shoes on in case someone tried to open the motel door at night. That night I didn't sleep. Not out of anger. Just clarity. Things clicked into place in a way that made everything else look like static. They didn't just lie to me. They didn't ignore me. They wanted me out of the picture. Forgotten. My grandmother called the next morning. You saw it? Yeah. Good. We'll be selling it. That money will go into Mia's name. She didn't wait for a thank you. Just said she'd talk to me soon. A few days later, I heard through someone at Mia's preschool that my mother was volunteering at the church thrift store. My brother picked up a temp job doing deliveries. My dad stopped showing up to the golf club altogether. No one said anything to me directly. No apologies. No explanations. Just silence. It was funny how quickly they disappeared when the money did. I started to feel something I hadn't in months. Maybe longer. Steady. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was watching people fall off a pedestal they built with stolen bricks and realizing I never needed to climb it in the first place. Everything I had now was mine. And Mia's. And they couldn't touch a single piece of it. It was late fall when the letter came. I'd just come back from picking Mia up from preschool. She was laughing, talking about some clay animal she made in art class, and I was only half listening, watching her little sneakers leave leaf prints on the doormat. The envelope was sitting in the mailbox. Thick, cream-colored paper. My name written in my grandmother's tight, even handwriting. No return address. She never needed one. Inside was just one page. She wrote that the sale of the second apartment was complete. Every cent from the transaction had been placed into a trust. One that would belong solely to Mia. Not shared, not managed by anyone else. Locked until she turned 18 with every protection in place. Then at the bottom a single line. I gave them time to come clean. They chose silence. Now they get to live in it. No signature. Just that. I read it 3 times and folded it slowly like something sacred. Then I placed it in the drawer next to my bed. The same drawer where I kept Mia's birth certificate and the court papers that gave me full custody. My ex had stopped showing up to hearings. Stopped texting. When he realized I had legal representation and wasn't afraid anymore, he vanished. Just like the rest of them. And that became the strange, quiet theme of my life. They were just gone. No more calls from my mother. No more long voicemails dripping with guilt and revisionist history. My brother, who used to flood social media with vacation photos and hustle culture quotes, went completely dark. A distant cousin told me in passing that he was working nights at a storage facility and living with his in-laws. My parents apparently sold the house. Rumors circled around, money issues, a private matter, but no one asked them directly. Because no one in our family ever really asked anything directly. They preferred to act like nothing ever happened. But something had. And it left a crater in the middle of everything they built. Meanwhile, my life was getting quieter, fuller, slower. I found work. Nothing glamorous but steady. A small legal assistant position, part-time. Enough to cover what the trust didn't. Enough to breathe. Mia got a spot in a good public school. We had routines now. Grocery trips. Library afternoons. Weekends at the park. We weren't rich. But we weren't afraid anymore. There were hard nights, sure. Days I felt the weight of everything that had been taken from me. Nights I'd wake up in that apartment, still surprised the roof was mine, and remember the flickering motel ceiling, the smell of old carpet, the way I used to keep my shoes on in case we had to run in the middle of the night. But now we had a life. And one night something strange happened. I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring out like I always do. Then I checked the voicemail. It was my father. His voice was low, flat. No anger, no begging. Just a message. He said they were sorry. That things had gotten twisted. That maybe they'd convinced themselves it was all a misunderstanding. But that now, with everything gone, he could see clearly. He ended the message with something I hadn't heard in years. Take care of your daughter, Rebecca. We should have done better. I didn't call back. There was no point. It wasn't that I hated them. I just didn't owe them the version of me who used to hope they'd change. That version of me lived in a motel. This one owned a set of keys no one could take away. A few weeks later, my grandmother invited us to her place for tea. It wasn't formal. Just me and Mia, sitting on her old velvet couch, flipping through photo albums and drinking cocoa. At one point she looked at me and said quietly, "You know, I always thought they'd protect you. That's what parents are supposed to do." I didn't say anything. She closed the album and looked out the window for a long moment. Then said, "But blood isn't a promise. You learn that too late sometimes." And she was right. They could have had me in their lives. They could have had Mia. They chose to hide things, to manipulate, to leave us out in the cold while they smiled at brunches and pretended we were fine. And now they had nothing. We weren't a secret anymore. We were a family. A real one. Smaller maybe. But built on something solid. Not silence. Not lies. Just survival. Truth. And a future that no one else got to rewrite.